Some men spend a lifetime trying to earn a seat at somebody else's table. I spent mine building my own table, plank by plank, in silence, and I was ready to burn it down the day a man with soft hands and a hard mouth told my daughter she'd married beneath her family's name. Remember that part, because everything I'm about to tell you only makes sense once you understand who I really am underneath the coveralls. It was a Thursday morning in late April, out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. One of those mornings where the sky hadn't decided yet if it wanted rain or sun, and the wind kept pushing the smell of cut grass through the open garage door. I was down in my shop on the edge of Broken Arrow, hands black with grease, halfway through rebuilding a transmission for a customer, when my phone started buzzing on the workbench. Marissa, calling at 8:15 on a Thursday. She should have been dropping my grandbaby off at daycare right about now. Hey, sweetheart, what's... Nothing. Just breathing. That ragged kind of breathing a grown woman does when she's trying so hard not to fall apart that it comes out worse than crying would. Dad. Her voice cracked clean in half on that one word, and something in my chest folded in on itself. Can you come get me? Please. I'm at the Route 66 diner off 71st. I was already wiping my hands on a rag, already walking. Don't you move, baby girl. I'm coming. I found her in a back booth, little Wyatt asleep in his car seat beside her, thumb in his mouth, a half-eaten pack of animal crackers spilled across the table where she'd been trying to keep him quiet. Marissa's makeup was smeared down one cheek. 2 suitcases sat wedged against the booth wall like they were trying to hide. 2 suitcases. Lord. I slid in across from her and didn't say a word for a good 4 seconds. Just looked at my daughter, looked at that sleeping baby, looked out the window at the cars going by on 71st, like the whole world hadn't just tilted sideways. Then I looked back at her. Why aren't you at the house? She laughed. Not a real laugh, the kind that comes out of you when crying stopped working an hour ago and your body's got nothing else left to offer. Robert kicked us out, Daddy. Kicked you out. I said it flat. Let it sit in my mouth like it tasted wrong because it did. His father came by last night. Charles. She wrapped both hands around a coffee cup gone cold. Been talking to some people, apparently. About us. About me. About you, how? She wouldn't look at me. Traced the rim of the cup with one finger instead. He told Robert that if he kept me as his wife, kept Wyatt as his son, he was cutting him out of the family trust completely. Said. She stopped, swallowed hard enough I heard it. Said our family wasn't the kind of stock the Ashfords needed diluting their name with. Stock, like we were cattle. Like my daughter, my grandson, 31 years of me getting up at 5 in the morning to keep this family fed and clothed and safe, all of it reduced to bloodline math by a man who'd never changed his own oil in his life. And Robert just went along with it. He didn't fight it, Dad. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry now, like she'd used up every tear she had back at that house. He said we'd figure something out, that maybe I should stay with you for a little while until things settled down. Like I'm a problem that needs settling. Wyatt stirred, blinked up at both of us with those big brown eyes, 4 years old and no idea the ground had just shifted under his whole life. Grandpa, he said, serious as a church deacon, Mommy said we're going on an adventure. I reached over and put my hand on that boy's small shoulder. That's right, buddy. Grandpa's got the adventure handled. I stood up slow, the way I do when my mind's already 3 steps ahead of my body. Get the bags, sweetheart. Marissa blinked at me. What? Dad, where would we even... The bags. We're not doing this in a diner booth. I picked up Wyatt myself, settled him on my hip like he weighed nothing at all. Get in the truck. She knew that tone. Every child knows that tone from their daddy, the one that doesn't leave room for a follow-up question. She grabbed both suitcases without another word. We drove north on Memorial, then cut over toward the industrial side of town, past the distribution centers and the truck yards, Marissa glancing at me sideways the whole way, waiting for me to say something comforting, something fatherly. I turned the radio on instead. George Strait. Seemed about right. Dad, you're kind of scaring me. Good. Means you're paying attention. I checked my mirror, merged lanes. 31 years I've kept my mouth shut about something, Marissa. 31 years of 6 a.m., starts, and handshake deals, and putting every extra dollar back into something instead of into a bigger house or a nicer truck. Not your mother, God rest her. Not my own brother. Not you. Not the whole picture anyway. Kept what quiet? You'll see in about 90 seconds. I turned off Memorial onto a long private drive that ran behind a stretch of warehouses near the rail yard, all the way back to a building that took up most of a city block. Steel letters over the main entrance, clean and understated, Halloran Industrial Supply. Marissa sat up straight in her seat. Dad, what is this place? I parked, cut the engine, sat there a second, looking at what 3 decades of silence had built. This, I said, is yours. Has been the whole time, only you didn't know it yet. I opened the door and stepped out into the morning. We had a vendor meeting that needed rescheduling. Charles Ashford had no idea what that meant. Not yet. If you've been sitting with me a minute and this story's got its hooks in you already, go on and hit that like button, drop me a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Means more to me than you know. There's a particular kind of quiet that fills a room when somebody realizes they spent years underestimating the wrong man. It doesn't announce itself. It just settles in, soft as dust after a storm's passed through. I'd lived inside that kind of quiet my whole working life. Charles Ashford was about to get a proper introduction to it. Friday morning, 6:50 a.m. I was already at Halloran before the first forklift started up. Built that habit 30 years back and never once let it go. You want to know if a business is healthy, don't look at the spreadsheets first. Look at who's already there when the sun comes up and who's still there after it goes down. I'd been that man since before Marissa could walk. My office sat up on the mezzanine level, glass wall looking down over the warehouse floor. Nothing showy. A steel desk, 2 chairs, a whiteboard covered in numbers that would have made Charles Ashford's eyes water if he'd ever bothered to ask where his son's father-in-law actually worked. On the corner of my desk sat a photo in a cheap frame Marissa at 8 years old, holding up a base she'd caught off the dock at Grand Lake, grinning like she'd whipped the whole ocean. I looked at that photo every morning of my life. That Friday it hit different. My warehouse manager, Dale Petrie, rapped twice on the door frame and walked in right at 7. Dale was a broad, plain-spoken man out of Sand Springs who'd been running my floor for 17 years. He took one look at my face and sat straight down without being asked. You want coffee first, or should I just go ahead and brace myself? Pull the Ashford freight account, I said. His eyebrows crept up a notch. Ashford Freight. That's the trucking outfit out of Broken Arrow. Moves our regional distribution. That's the one. He already had his tablet in hand. They're 2 years into a 5-year logistics contract, Sam. Handles almost 60% of our outbound freight west of the Mississippi. 60%. Charles Ashford had spent years bragging at his country club about his booming freight and logistics company, without ever once mentioning that the account keeping it afloat, the contract that made his quarterly numbers sing, ran straight through a supply company owned by the man whose daughter he'd just thrown out onto the street. He'd called my family unworthy stock while cashing checks with my signature on them. I almost smiled. Almost. I'm not canceling the contract, I told Dale. I'm restructuring it. Pull every clause on vendor performance review. I want a formal evaluation letter drafted, standard language, nothing hostile. Notify Ashford Freight that Halloran Industrial is conducting a comprehensive service review effective immediately. All payments held pending outcome. That's a heavy hammer for a Friday, Sam. It's standard procedure. It's written into the contract itself, Section 9, Paragraph 2. I know because my lawyer and I wrote it that way 5 years ago. I leaned back, 30 days to respond before we determine continuation. Dale nodded slow, the way a man does when he understands something that sounds routine is anything but. And who's running point on this evaluation? I picked up the photo of Marissa, set it back down facing me. New director of vendor relations. Dale blinked. We don't have a director of... We do as of Monday. She picked up on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. She'd slept in her old room the night before, first time in 11 years. Wyatt curled up in the middle of her childhood bed like a puppy while she folded herself around the edges of it. Dad, it's barely 8. It's 10 after. I didn't fall asleep till almost 4. Fair enough. How's the boy? A pause while she checked on him. Still out cold. Sleeping like the world didn't just end. That's because he trusts the world still steady under him, which it is. You understand me? Silence on the line. Marissa, I need you at Halloran Industrial by 10 o'clock this morning. Business clothes. We're going to walk the floor. I'm going to introduce you to some folks. And then you and I are going to sit down, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I've built these last 30 years and what your place in it looks like from here on out. Dad, what even is this company? I've heard you mention Halloran maybe twice in my whole life. It's yours. Has been since before you could spell your own name. I picked my coffee back up. 10 o'clock. Don't be late. She walked through the front doors at 9:57. I watched her through the glass before she saw me. Watched her stop dead just past the entrance. Tilt her head back at the ceiling 40 feet up. Cranes and conveyor lines and forklifts moving in that particular rhythm that only comes from years of people who know exactly what they're doing. Her mouth actually fell open a little. Good. That's the right reaction. Dale walked her over. When she reached me, she looked like a woman trying to solve a math problem that kept coming out too big for the page. Dad. She looked around again, then back at me. This whole time? This whole time. You drive a 14-year-old Silverado. Still do. I started walking, and she fell in step. Your mother knew. Knew enough, anyway. Knew why we kept it quiet, too. Money changes how people look at you, Marissa. The wrong folks find out what you're sitting on, and suddenly everybody's got a handout and a story about why they deserve a piece of it. I watched that happen to my own father. Wasn't going to let it happen to us. We ended up in my office. I shut the door, poured 2 coffees, spread 3 folders across the desk: financials, the org chart, and the Ashford freight vendor file. She picked up the last one first. I watched her face while she read it. Watched the exact second she registered the company name. Ashford Freight. Her voice had gone quiet. That's Charles's company. Has been our vendor for 6 years. You're telling me while Charles Ashford was sitting at his own dinner table calling our family unworthy, he was making his living off a contract with your company? The room went very still. What's in the folder? She said finally, steady in a way that honestly impressed me. Vendor performance evaluation notice. Payments held pending review. And who's conducting the review? I slid the second document across an offer letter. Director of Vendor Relations, Halloran Industrial Supply. A compensation package that made whatever she'd been living on before look like pocket change. Her hands went still on the desk. Dad, I've never run anything like this in my life. You raised a good boy alone half the time while working full shifts at that hospital. You held a household together through things I know you never told me about. That's most of leadership right there, showing up when nobody's watching. I'll teach you the rest. She stared at that offer letter a long moment. When Charles gets that evaluation notice, he's going to start making calls. He's going to ask around plenty, I agreed. And eventually he's going to figure out exactly whose loading dock he's been backing his trucks into for 6 years. And then what? Then, sweetheart, he's going to have to call you. She picked up a pen off my desk and signed the letter. The quiet that followed was the most satisfied quiet I'd felt in 31 years of building something out of nothing but sweat and silence. The evaluation notice went out that Friday at 4:40 in the afternoon. By Saturday morning, I had 2 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. I recognized it anyway, let it ring to voicemail both times. He wasn't ready to talk to me. He needed to talk to my daughter first. And for the first time in 3 days, Marissa was sleeping just fine. Monday afternoon, Charles Ashford walked into that office and found her standing, not sitting. Jacket on, hands loose at her sides. The production floor humming steady below the windows like something that had never once skipped a beat in its life. She looked, if I'm honest with you, like a woman who'd been standing in that exact spot her whole life. I stood out in the hallway where I could hear everything and see nothing, close enough to catch every word, far enough to give my daughter her room. Marissa. Charles's voice was careful, measured, a man recalibrating in real time. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding about this evaluation. No misunderstanding, she said. Not sharp, just final. Standard procedure. It's written right into your contract, Section 9, Paragraph 2. A pause I could feel through the wall. Look, I understand things are complicated between our families right now, and I'm not dismissing that, but business is business. And I don't think personal matters ought to cloud what's been a mutually beneficial. You're right, Marissa said. Business is business, which is why I want to be completely fair about what happens next. I heard a folder slide across the desk. Revised vendor agreement, she went on. New terms, fair pricing, realistic delivery windows, nothing punitive, nothing personal. Silence while he read. I could picture him in that room, silver hair, expensive watch, 6 years of comfortable assumptions coming apart, line by line, under a document prepared by the daughter-in-law he'd tried to erase from his family 4 days earlier. 4 days. Charles Ashford had turned our whole world sideways on a Wednesday night, and by Monday afternoon his company's entire freight lifeline was sitting across a desk in a building her father had quietly owned the whole time. Somebody up there's got a sense of humor. Doesn't always show his hand early, though. These terms are reasonable, Charles said, something different underneath his voice now. I know, I wrote them to be. More silence. Then, softer, what I said, about your family, about you not being the right. He stopped on the word, couldn't get it out a second time. I was wrong. I told myself for years it was about standards. It wasn't. It's okay, Marissa said. I forgive you. I stopped breathing out there in that hallway, not from anger, from recognition, because that was the most honest thing Charles Ashford had said in his entire life, and he had no idea I was standing close enough to hear it. The evaluation runs its course regardless, she went on. But Wyatt needs his grandfather. Whatever that looks like from here, that's between you and Robert and God, not me. She let that sit. Didn't rush to fill the silence with comfort he hadn't earned yet. I appreciate that, Charles said finally, genuinely. Then I need you to hear one more thing. Her voice dropped, quiet in the way that commands a room better than shouting ever could. Not as your vendor, not as your son's wife, as a person standing in front of you. I held my breath. My father built this company for 31 years without asking one soul's permission. He built it for us, for Wyatt. You looked at our family and decided we weren't worth your name. You told your own son to walk away from his wife and child over it. And now you're sitting in a building you never knew existed, reviewing a contract that decides whether your company survives next quarter. Nobody moved. Nobody made you sit in that chair, Charles. You did that yourself the day you decided money made you better than people. Then I heard something slide across the desk again, a pen. My father taught me real power doesn't need to humiliate anybody, she said. It just makes things clear. I closed my eyes out there in the hall. The silence that followed felt like the longest 10 seconds of my whole life. Then came the scratch of a pen against paper. Charles Ashford signed the contract. Marissa signed after him, calm, deliberate, the way a person signs something they already decided a long time ago. Nobody said another word about bloodlines or family stock or any of it. Nobody needed to. Everybody in that room already knew who'd come out standing. I didn't walk in. Never did. I went down to the lot, leaned against my old Silverado, and looked up at that flat gray Oklahoma sky a good long while. 31 years. Not one day of it was ever really about revenge, whatever it might have looked like from the outside. It was about building something solid enough that when the storm finally came looking for my family, there'd be somewhere real for them to stand. I thought about my own daddy pressing a coffee can full of savings into my hands when I was 22, everything he owned in that can. I thought about Marissa at 8 years old holding up that base like she'd conquered the whole world. I thought about Wyatt calling this whole nightmare an adventure because he trusted the grown-ups around him to make it one. Charles Ashford called our family stock that wasn't worth diluting his name. This was our bloodline right here. A grandfather who built in silence for 3 decades. A daughter who stood her ground without raising her voice. A grandson who didn't understand yet what was being protected for him, but would spend his whole life standing inside the proof of it. Robert came around 2 weeks later, by the way. Showed up at my daughter's door with flowers and an apology that actually meant something once his father's shadow wasn't hanging over every decision he made. But that's a story for another day, and Marissa's the one who gets to tell it, not me. No amount of money, no logistics contract, no country club membership measures what actually matters. I got in my truck, turned the radio back to George Strait, and drove home through my own town, in my same old truck, The way I've driven home for 31 years. Quiet, whole, undefeated. If this one got you right in the chest, that's exactly why I keep telling them. Hit like, subscribe if you're new around here, and tell me down in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I'll see you on the next one.